We talked about in a past segment a speech that Donald Trump delivered in Pennsylvania where he was noticeably confused, rambly, and incoherent, as we see so often at these events. And there was one particular moment that sparked a lot of public discourse. So I want to reflect on that moment, then get to Jon Stewart last night mocking Trump for it. And I'll bring in Jessiah, who will be guest hosting this segment with me. First, let me remind you of this Gettysburg rant from Trump's speech in Pennsylvania.
Where our union was saved by the immortal heroes at Gettysburg. Gettysburg, what an unbelievable battle that was. The Battle of Gettysburg, what an unbelievable, I mean, it was so much and so interesting and so vicious and horrible and so beautiful in so many different ways. It represented such a big portion of the success of this country.
I'm going to really quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button plus the like button as well and the alert bell so you get notifications. Back to it.
Gettysburg, wow. I go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to look and to watch. And the statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor. Did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys, never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake. He lost his great general, and they were fighting. Never fight uphill, me boys, but it was too late.
I don't know. So Jessiah, I want to bring in Jessiah, host of the Pondering Politics show on YouTube.
And guest host of the Luke Beasley show, okay? Welcome back to the Luke Beasley. I've always wanted to use that phrase, and you wouldn't let me use it, Luke.
Okay,
gosh.
There it is. Yeah. And I don't, before we get to Jon Stewart, I can't imagine waiting all day. You know, Jessiah, I've traveled to a lot of these rallies to talk to Trump supporters and be shocked and horrified by what they have to say. And I don't ever understand as I speak to them and I see them waiting outside. Some of them camped the night before to get in the front of the line for this. Why on earth you would do all of that to hear Trump talk like you just heard? It's like some random person you're sitting next to on the subway who's rambling to themselves. Oh, Gettysburg. Wow. Horrible. Vicious. Beautiful. Wow. Gettysburg. I go watch Gettysburg.
Listen, Luke, that's your take, but obviously I think what we saw here from former President Donald Trump is the real Gettysburg Address. Let's be honest. I mean, this is going to bump President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address down a peg. No, I mean, obviously you're right. This was wildly incoherent. Like, this to me is just yet another, block in the building that we're constructing when we're trying to prove that Donald Trump is not mentally fit for office, especially by the standard that the right is trying to impose on President Biden. If this had been Joe Biden, the media would have been freaking out. But actually what's interesting is that even though the president is a gaffe machine, and I don't think any of us will dispute that, President Biden actually understands what happens at Gettysburg. He is a learned person. He is somebody who is interested in history. He knows more about Gettysburg than just the name Gettysburg, right? And so he could actually, even at his worst, President Biden can actually convey to an audience what happened at the Battle of Gettysburg. Whereas Donald Trump, he's like, Gettysburg, beautiful. Robert E. Lee said, don't go uphill, boys. Like a hill, it's going to cause some shin issues. You might roll an ankle. And also, did you catch the part where he said, Robert E. Lee is no longer in favor? Like, what happened there? like that's a new development?
Truly, I was going to say, I forgot to comment on that coming out of the clip. Yes. What are you saying? And the funny thing is seeing even the crowd members, just stunned and confused by what Trump's saying. Like, they're down for the ride, but they're still a little bit confused on where the heck Trump's going with this. Robert E. Lee, no longer in favor. Why is that? I think you can do the math on that one, Trump, as to why he might not be in quote unquote favor. And just to remind you before getting to Jon Stewart, to fully contextualize this speech, for those of you who didn't see my past coverage of it, here are just a couple other moments that we talked about.
Do you have a drug problem? No, we have no drug problem. Why is that? Quick trial. I said, tell me about a quick trial. When they catch the seller of drugs, right, the purveyor of drugs, they immediately give them, the drug dealers, they immediately give them a trial. Takes 1 day. one day, at the end of that day, if they're guilty, which they always are, according to people that study this, I don't think anybody has never been guilty. Is it crazy, really? Just this week, it was reported that an illegal alien, and you just look at this, what's happening.
Yeah, so pretty confused and struggling to speak there. So before anything else, here's what Jon Stewart had to say about the Gettysburg moment.
Gettysburg, what an unbelievable battle that was, the Battle of Gettysburg. What an unbelievable, I mean, it was so much and so interesting and so vicious and horrible and so beautiful in so many different ways. It represented such a big portion of the success of this country. Gettysburg, wow.
That is plagiarized almost directly from my 7th grade book report, Gettysburg, wow.
You know, and actually, because I'm going to reference the point where I saw it was on friend of the show, David Pakman's show, where he made a similar point. Here's that.
Which sounds like, remember in 5th grade when you had to give an oral book report and you hadn't read the book? That's what this sounds like to me.
So I guess a lot of people make this point, but hilarious to me, Jessiah, because I couldn't put my finger on what it was that it felt like and it reminded me so much of. That's what it is. You go in for a book report, you didn't read the book, and you're just sort of getting this is Gettysburg. Wow, it's a vicious, horrible, and beautiful if you really think about it. And someone named Robert E. Lee, no longer in favor. Good teach?
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and Donald Trump would probably struggle to give any book report unless, again, reportedly Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. That was probably the only book that we have any evidence that Trump has ever read. I mean, it's absolutely the case. He's, people talk about how he's such a charismatic speaker, and this is something I've struggled with because he commands a cult, an authoritarian cult of personality comprised of tens of millions of Americans. So on some level, there has to be some sort of charisma about it. But this idea that he's this masterful speaker, I just don't buy it. I mean, charisma, can manifest itself in terms of speech in a variety of ways. Like I look at the two most charismatic public speakers in modern presidential history, right? And you have Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. And even then, there are meaningful differences in terms of how the two of them spoke. President Obama was a scholar, and he used scholarly language, right? Whereas President Clinton was seen as a more folksy kind of guy, right? That he was a more liberal Ronald Reagan. So it's not like, you have to be a particularly scholarly speaker, but Trump doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And it's so obvious. And to your point, you have to get the impression that the people in attendance, at least some of them, are like, wrap it up. Can we just go on, get to the next thing? Talk about crooked Joe Biden or something. Please stop talking about the Gettysburg Address. But he comes off as somebody who is trying to give a book report on a book that he has never read and never had any interest of reading. And I wonder how much more Trump can get away with doing this, especially as the election gets closer. We've talked about, how there's a polling perception that President Biden is mentally unfit for office. But poll after poll after poll, Luke, the same polls show that a majority of Americans feel the same way about Donald Trump. And the more instances of stuff like this, don't you think it might accrue a political penalty for him as we get closer to the election?
There better be, because now we've seen so many moments that would be 24/7 coverage on Fox News if it were Joe Biden. And I think it's because Trump is screaming his gaffes often, And so if he's shouting and if he's sweating and if he's orange and his hair's, how his hair is, then people perceive it differently than sort of a calm and quiet Biden having a gaffe. But imagine if Biden were like delivering some speech commemorating Gettysburg and went, folks, wow, it's vicious. Beautiful. Folks, wow. Robert E. Lee.
Malarkey.
Yeah.
Throw malarkey in there.
Wow, it's malarkey. You would see so much coverage of that. Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's struggling to remember what his point was. And I think what it is Trump doesn't like exactly how he feels about the subject. And so he wants to get to the beautiful part, which is why it felt so disjointed. Because I've heard him say similar things about the Civil War more broadly. He'll do this weird thing where he's like, Civil War, it's so fascinating and incredible, but vicious. And I just can't stop thinking of it. It's just weird. And so he kind of has to, yeah, go.
I was gonna say he's like describing his like a Tinder date or something like that.
Weird.
It's just like it gave me the butterflies. I felt a certain way. It was just so stunning.
And also,
yeah,
what did he mean?
Weird.
It represented the greatest success of America. Obviously, eventually America prevailed, and that's good. But then he's talking about Robert E. Lee and the good advice. So are you saying that? What? There's just a lot there that I don't even want to dive into because it is horrible. But I really do think he's covering, with all the different language he's throwing out there, some really nasty feelings that he doesn't want people to know about this particular subject that is a little disturbing. Before we say any more, I did put together for you all, so prepare yourself, a Trump gaffe compilation just from, I don't even think gaffe's the right word. I don't think gaffes are bad. I think it's more cognitive episode, okay, compilation. And this is just from a few of the more prominent ones recently.
With Obama, we won an election that everyone said couldn't be won. Obama dropped missiles and they ended up hitting a kindergarten. If that's the case, he's going to end up being indicted when he leaves office.
Obama he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't even mention them in his statements. It's all coming through Iran.
Well, you mean President Biden?
They were interviewing him 2 weeks ago, and they said, what would you advise President Obama? The whole world seems to be exploding. They never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guard, so whatever they want. They turned it down. We would be in World War II very quickly if we're going to be relying on this man. When I came here, everyone thought Bush was going to win. They thought Bush because Bush supposedly was a military person. Great. You know what? He was a military. He got us into the Middle East. We came up with a new couple of words for corn. Viktor Orban, Hungary, very powerful. He fronts on both Russia and Ukraine. They were funding Hezbollah and Hamas. We're also going to place strong protections to stop banks and regulators from trying to debank you from your political beliefs, what they do. They want to debank you, and we're going to debank. Think of this. Is it crazy, really? Just this week it was reported that an illegal alien, and you just look at this, what's happening. He must be cognitively impaired. I'm not cognitively. And you know what? When I am, you're going to know it. You're going to be the first people. I know my people. Viktor Orban. Did anyone ever hear of him? He's probably like one of the strongest leaders anywhere in the world. And he's the leader of, right? He's the leader of Turkey. Fronts on both Russia. The Biden border will. Well, you know this, right? Even Argentina. They went MAGA. You know Argentina, great guy. We will expel the warmongers. We are a nation that just recently heard that Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat.
So I guess, Jessiah, I was listening to some political scientists talk about the overt, non-stop, active effort on the part of the right wing to make Americans think what a lot of Americans think about Joe Biden. And often, how many times, we have these phrases that always come up when we collaborate, but the whole facts speak for themselves thing, when they obviously don't. I think Democrats think, it would be rude to keep pointing out Trump's cognitive episodes and just playing these reels over and over and over again. But to your point, if Americans and if pundits are justifying their feelings so often about Joe Biden, their doubts about a second term, by citing public opinion, and so many people will say, well, a lot of people have doubts. And as I've talked about, maybe that would change if a couple outlets did a little coverage of the actual governance and not just the age, but the governance of Joe Biden. But setting that aside, with Trump, how are we supposed to expect people to know how much he's struggling if we don't talk about it. And so that's why, to my audience, you hear these stories reoccurring, because people need to know about it. And we're not going to go as hard in the paint as the right. It's not in our nature. We're too kind when it comes to this subject, but it should be brought up repeatedly, especially if they're going to dishonestly attack Biden.
It absolutely should be. Listen, if that's the standard, then everybody needs to play by the same standard. Like, that's the thing. Republicans are given a blank check to set the standard. If that's the case, which I reject, they shouldn't be given a blank check to set the standard. But at the very least, then they should be held to the same standard that they set for everybody else. They won't even do that. That was why during my recent conversation with Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman, this was a major thesis of the questions that I had and a major thesis to his answers, which is that, the Michelle Obama ethic of when they go low, we go high, that is a beautiful sentiment that really doesn't have a place in modern contemporary politics because of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. Now, you don't go as low as they do, right? Because when they go low, very often they go into like criminal insurrectionist territory, right? But in terms of the aggressive rhetoric, Dan Goldman conceded, Congressman Goldman conceded that Democrats have to step up their game. They have to be more ruthless. They have to be more aggressive. And they have to hold Republicans to the same standard that Republicans try to impose on literally everybody else. And he says that that is part of the reason that he wanted to go to Congress, was to bring a fighter's mentality, a rhetorical fighter's mentality. I really want to be clear about this, and why he and Congressman Moskowitz and Congresswoman Crockett have been so effective and been putting the Republicans in their place, because they want to give, in Dan Goldman's own words, a taste of their own medicine. And I think it's perfectly justified.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you were thinking to yourself right now, you see, if you're watching on YouTube, that the little red line's getting to the end, and you're thinking, no, Josiah's going to be gone probably in the next video, and I just want more of him. You can get more of him. He does this every day on his own channel. Where can people find that, Jessiah?
YouTube.com/app Pondering Politics, one word. And I got to tell you, I love doing that on my channel, but I love coming here too and co-hosting the Luke Beasley Show. I want to eventually say, welcome back to the Luke Beasley Show. I'm not Luke Beasley. Luke, you got to let me do that sometime, man. You got to let me.
Really passionate about that. Well, we'll leave it there, everybody.